I'm doing terrific. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. So I just want to start off by talking about your guys' reunion show that you did last May there. How did it feel to get back together with the guys and play all those old songs?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal to be honest with you. Any show, especially now that we all live in different cities around the country, it took months of planning and preparation, and to be honest with you, being told that from a lot of promoters that they weren't comfortable like taking the show just because they didn't know if anyone would show up. And
Yeah.
so once we finally got into that week, we had found out before, about a week before the show, that it sold out. And then, it was from that point on, it was just amazing. It was surreal. It felt really good to get back together. We had to spend 4 full days rehearsing, 3 or 4, just because it had been 8 years since we'd even been in the same room together, let alone,
Yeah.
practicing the songs, playing the songs, knowing how they went. I have I would say, a very different singing style now than I did back then. And so figuring out the right key to put songs in and things like that are things that people don't really think about a lot. But there's a lot of time and preparation that went into it. So it was very, very good to kind of see that come to life and finally, culminate into the show itself. And the performance was unreal.
Yeah, and when you guys did your first few practices, what were they like? Did you forget a lot of like the lyrics to songs and stuff?
Yes and no. Like I have a very, you know, very strict aversion to failure. And the reason I mention that is because I came in pretty prepared. I made sure that I had the songs in advance, and Rob and I actually, at the time, were the only ones who lived in Edmonton, and so we got together and went over the songs together in person to make sure that he had his parts, I had my parts. So it still is different. There were definitely some growing pains once we're all in the room together with things that that come together in the live show. So that took the first day and a half was definitely getting over the mistakes and relearning some stuff. But I definitely put myself in a position that I wasn't going to allow myself to fall flat on my face for sure.
And did you guys ever anticipate that show selling out?
mm, so there's the answer I usually give, and then the true answer. And so what I tell people is like, no way, it blew me away. But if I'm honest with you, I felt like we still had something there, at least in terms of like, even if it was just a novelty for people, right? I'm like, for people to kind of relive that, I did feel like we had a good shot at it if enough people knew about it, and that all goes into promotion. And thank God we have Andrew, our manager now, and he works his butt off, and he's a huge reason that show got successful. But part of me always definitely anticipated there would be that we could rely on the old fans to show up.
Yeah, and how did it feel for the people that came out and supported you guys after all this time of you being off with the band?
As much as I say, like I thought, a lot of people would come. It blew me away. It was emotional, to be honest with you. It really, really was. I spent the entire show day kind of we had rented an Airbnb, an apartment kind of across the street from the venue. I don't like to be talking a lot the day of a show, especially one that important. So I was keeping to myself. And an hour before showtime, I finally went to the venue. We had sound checked earlier in the day, but then I spent the whole day at the apartment. And backstage was just filled with faces from the past, people from Much Music who were kind of there in the beginning when we shot the reality show. People who had, maybe even just been friends of our management, people who came out to our first shows, people who were like big fans, like family members, that people we would consider family nowadays. It was just filled with faces and people supporting, and it was overwhelming. It was such an amazing feeling, and that's before the show even started. That was an hour
Yeah.
before, and so I knew, like at that point when you have that many people around you and you feel the support and the love, you're gonna have a good show. The hard
Yeah,
part's over.
I bet.
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite moment from that show?
It's so tough to pinpoint one. Obviously, there's the moment I just described, coming backstage and seeing the friends and stuff was great. Oh my God, like there's no feeling like a crowd singing the words back at you louder than you're singing through a microphone. So we have
Yeah.
the crowd favorites, Turn It Up, obviously Summer Girl at the end, but just songs even throughout the set where people like knew the words and were singing them back, and people are just having as much fun as we are. There's not a specific moment. And I'm not gonna lie, the moment we're done this set, where you can kind of just breathe out, and there's an after party, things like that. That was pretty cool too, to know like we did what we came here to do. So from start to finish, it was just filled with special moments.
And how did you guys come about that you're going to do this 10-year reunion show?
That was something that was like almost a year in advance, because as we were coming up to it, you know that you only have that 10-year, it only comes around once. If we would have waited
Yeah.
till this year, that would be 11, and it's not as cool sounding. And to be completely honest with you, when things ended with Stereos, it wasn't super amicable. Like there was some like rough feelings between some people, justifiably so, I would say. And so for the first few years when the band was done, it wasn't all like happy feelings like we did something great. There was some people, not everyone was on the same page. But slowly over time, you realize how cool it was what we did. And so I really thought that we wanted to go out on our own terms and be like, why don't we just celebrate this? If 10 people show up, at least we did this 10 years to the day, have some fun, play some songs together. And so that was the motivation behind it. And that's why it took so long, is to kind of get more people. And then again, we tried to find booking agents or maybe promoters who would take the show on for us, and it just wasn't happening. So we had to do it ourselves. So that was a lot of effort that went into that.
Yeah. And what point or when did you guys decide that you're going to get back together as a band? Was that show kind of the deciding factor?
Bingo. Yeah. I think it was, we all have our own egos. And when you get to play a performance like that and just feel that much support, I think it was a very easy decision. And it was when I got home from that trip that I started writing in Sunset Gold, which was, has now come out. That was the first song I wrote for this sort of new direction, new project. And it was only solidified when we sold out Edmonton months later too, because we did a hometown one, and that one sold out. And we're like, okay, we have something here. And like I said earlier, I get it. I have enough self-awareness to know that a lot of those people came to the show because it was kind of a funny thing. It's like, oh, it's Stereos, remember them. So I'm not saying like, oh, we can count on selling out shows forever now. We do have to put in work. We have to put in new music and things like that. But it was definitely, sorry, this is a long way of answering your question. Yes, definitely that show and the support and the love we felt was what made us all kind of say, okay, I'm not done doing this.
Yeah. And after you guys broke up that first time, did you ever think that it'd be a possibility of ever getting back together?
I did. Yeah, because I think that like it would be silly for me to always shut the door on something that had so much success and promise. And hey, man, it's easy to look at it, a few months out or in the middle of it and say, oh, well, this was hard, and I don't want to do that. But when you kind of have that 2020 vision of your hindsight and say, oh my God, like you can suck it up in those parts you don't like or change them, and really like harness the positivity that comes from a project like that, for sure.
Yeah. And when you guys were first starting as Stereos, what do you think that you as a band could have done differently to prevent that breakup from happening?
It's a very, very good question. And so, to be honest with you, we should have taken a year off after our second album because, we had money in the bank at that time, and we could have kind of just, done projects, traveled, things like that, and kind of come in refreshed. But what happened instead was our second album didn't do as well as the first, and we, that's the good side and the bad side to having a major label, I think, is that you have a ton of support, especially when you're doing well. But you definitely feel like, yeah, sort of less love, for lack of a better term, when things aren't going well. And so we kind of like lost steam when the second album, second touring like cycle didn't go as well. And that's a very natural thing. And we'd worked so hard to get there. Like this is a band that played to 5 people a night for years, and we loved it, and we just kept working, and we loved that feeling, just being on the road playing shows. So it was really out of character for us to kind of, for lack of a better term, give up when your second album didn't do well. And you have to understand too, when I'm saying we didn't do well, like when we were playing shows, there's still 600 people showing up to a show, and that to us was like bad. We could have used that perspective and said, let's take some time off and just regroup and write another album. But hindsight's 2020, like I said.
Yeah. And do you feel that your creative process in writing songs for Stereos has changed from, say, your first album to now releasing Sunset Gold?
It's funny. The process, no, has actually remained identical. Now, if you ever talk to a singer, by the way, or a songwriter especially, they'll always tell you that their newest stuff is their best. They will always do that. I am absolutely no exception to that rule. I always think like I've matured so much. I love the way the direction's gone, but the actual process is still just me on a computer writing songs. When I can't play an instrument, I'm very thankful for technology. It can allow me to write songs, and then the band takes it and we change it, put it through the filter of the guys putting their own flavor on it. And the live band, I think, separates us from other pop bands, is because we really want to have that live band sound. But the process, tried, tested, and true. To when I wrote Summer Girl in my dad's basement, to today, it's still just me on a computer, and the guys give me that space, which I really love.
Yeah. And when you guys went into the studio to record Sunset Gold, how much fun was it to get back and record and write that song?
It was silly. It was awesome, but I feel so bad for the production team because, like I said, so it was Rob, Dan, and I in Edmonton doing our parts, and Miles and Aaron got to do their parts out in Toronto, with their own people. But for the three of us in the studio, like, just ask anyone. We can be a handful. There's always someone talking. There's always someone joking around, and a lot of making fun of each other. So you have to have pretty tough skin to get in that circle. And the guys we recorded with were great, so they fit right in. But I feel bad for them because we're giddy. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, being back in the studio, bringing the song to life was because there's just so many steps along the way here that I'm describing that we never thought we'd have back. So it is almost more special this time around.
Yeah. And where do you get your ideas and inspiration to write songs?
Good question. And you know what? Everywhere. So I'm a person, and I've always mentioned Dan as kind of my sounding board because he gets exactly what I'm going for. But I can find inspiration from movies, believe it or not. Like, it's not even music. It'll be just a vibe, just from, watching a cool looking movie or something like that. And I'll be like, it just puts me in a mood to be creative. Of course, I do get inspiration from other songs as well. That's a big one, from artists I listen to. The first time I ever kind of realized I could write songs was when I was a kid. I didn't even know I was doing it, but I'd be humming my own vocal melodies over other people's songs, just on the radio. And my mom would be like, "What are you singing? Because that's not the song we're listening to." And I'd be like, "I don't know, mine's better." And so I can definitely just hear a song in the background and just start humming something and be like, "I think that's completely original. That's mine." So then I'll run with that. But it can come from nowhere, literally nowhere. My voice memos on my iPhone is the biggest occupier of space on my phone because it's just me humming melodies. I can be in the grocery store. I can be in the middle. Like, I was at, fortunately we have to be social distancing, but we went to sit on my sister's lawn the other night for her birthday. And there's a point where I had to get up and just go into my voice memo and just record an idea because I don't want to forget them. Most of them aren't that good, but some of them turn into something.
And when did you really get into music as a kid?
Another great question. So my thing was sports, always sports freak. I always loved the Oilers. When they started hitting and body checking in hockey, I realized I probably wasn't going to make it. It just, like, the game passed me by at that point. So then I got into skateboarding. And when I got into skateboarding, music was such a huge part of that culture as well. And it was kind of hip hop and punk rock. And I remember a lot of my friends would either kind of choose one or the other. But for me, I love both. And so I really got into, there's certain styles of skateboarding that kind of went with different styles of music. Some, like, it sounds maybe weird if you weren't into skateboarding, but some definitely had this punk rock image and mentality, and some had the hip hop, and I loved both equally. And so that's when I really started getting into both ends of the spectrum, which I think really influenced me as a songwriter later in life. But then the day it all changed was June 28th, 2000. I went to see a band called AFI, and at that time they were playing a venue called the Rev in Edmonton, which was 400 people. Like, they were not big yet, and it changed my life. The show they put on, I don't know if I touched my skateboard after that day. I was like, I'm going to do that. I don't even know if I can sing. I don't know if I have any skills, but I'm going to be in a band. And I ask anyone close to me, I can get tunnel vision, pretty obsessive about things that I love. And so from that day forward, it was just music, music, music.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So that was the day that you decided that you want to be in a band.
I have that moment in my life where it was like, that is what I'm going to do. It was, I remember feeling, I was like 14, I think. So, still pretty young.
Yeah.
And I had this body high of just like happiness after seeing that band. And it set my life on a completely new path for sure.
Yeah. And how did you meet all the other guys to form Stereos?
So Edmonton, that's one thing. And you're in Regina, right? Yeah, and so that's one thing I've noticed over time is those cities that, maybe other like big cities, Toronto, Calgary's one of them, Vancouver, they like to make fun of cities like Edmonton, Winnipeg, Regina, and say, oh, there's nothing to do in the middle of nowhere. But I'll tell you this, those cities always have the best music scenes. And I think it's probably bred from us not having as much to do. It's cold, it's crappy, like in those months, but there's always young, creative people who are, whether it's music or starting their own little restaurants, coffee shops, things like that, artists, they come from those cities a lot. You know, tattoo artists and stuff. Like a lot of them come from these smaller towns, and they end up, you know, doing great things. And so that is how, again, I go on for a long time, but that's how I met the guys.
Okay.
Edmonton has such a healthy music scene, and especially back then it did. It was hall shows, and you would go see every band. There were punk rock bands, indie rock bands, ska bands, and all kinds of music, and they'd play the same show. Hardcore bands, like, you know, like they would all play these same shows, and that's where you go meet people, and you'd start your own bands with people in the crowd, because you'd go see a band and you'd see whether it was, you know, I want girls to like me, or you just want to make new friends. There was a million ways, and it was like a cool, very accepting crowd too, right? There's not a lot of judgment. You can be whoever you want to be in those scenes. And so Edmonton always had a great scene, and that's how I met all the guys. Kind of, it just so happened that when I was starting this like screamo band, Rob had just left a band called Calico Drive. And it's funny because both Miles and Dan were in that band too, and so they ended up being in Stereo. So once that band started losing members, they just all joined ours. And then, long story, but it ended up, that's how Stereos kind of came about.
Oh, awesome. And you and Rob are also in a band called In All Alone. Is that more of a side project at the moment and just for fun?
Of course, yeah. And that's what I love about it, to be honest with you, is that there's no pressure at all with it, which makes it fun. And that's like how it should be. Of course, a lot of people have asked me like advice in Stereos, and my advice is that you got to do this expecting that nothing's going to come from it. And that might sound bad, but it's not. It's like that is the best way that you will always enjoy it, because keeping music fun, like going back to the days when you're in your garage, your basement, whatever it is, and you know that feeling when you're just having fun with it. That's what In All Alone really, really is. It's 100% pure fun, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. So I guess I just got one more question for you here.
Great.
What's next for Stereos? Are you guys going to release some more new music and maybe do some more shows?
100%. So this, you know, of course, I think like most people, I want the world to go back to normal. There's so many things I miss about that. I have been so fortunate, though, that I have been writing my butt off. And so I think, I don't know if we put it out there, but we're definitely going to do an album now. I have the songs for it, and I'm still writing. So it's tough, unfortunately, to tell what the time frame would be, because again, we live in different cities, so there's got to be travel, there's got to be studios booked and things like that. But I'm not gonna, we're all on the same page. We actually had a big Skype meeting the other day ourselves, and so album is the next move. I just don't know when it'll be, but the songs are there, and we have kind of a new direction we're going in, and I'm really, really excited about it.
Awesome. So thank you for doing this interview. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'll do it anytime.